Hello everybody, my name is Winback, and welcome to the Newcomer's Guide for Lost Ark. Now before we go diving into the new big thing, I want to make a few things clear. There are limitless videos on YouTube and streams on Twitch for Lost Ark content. So many of these videos have insanely useful information and can answer tons of questions you have if you're already playing this game. At the time of recording this video, though, I've sunk almost 80 hours into Lost Ark, and the Newcomer's Guide is geared towards players like me who may be hesitant to pick up an MMO. You see, I've never been a fan of this genre of game. Something about the combat and the presentation of these games has always sooner put me to sleep than it has sparked any real enjoyment. Games like WoW and Final Fantasy XIV put me in such a work-day mindset I've never been able to apply more than a few hours of attention. I attempted others like Albion Online, Bless Unleashed, Elder Scrolls Online with a little bit more success, but even then I ended up falling into the same rut and had to remove those as well. The real trouble, for me at least, with MMOs was the sheer daunting level of complexity that is inherently baked into the genetic makeup of the entire MMO landscape. I think this may be the same feeling for a lot of people, but all that aside, the point I'm trying to make is that this video series is geared towards the crowd who may think this game looks flashy, explosive, and fun, but can't bring themselves to download it after one look at one of the game's titanic menu screens. I'm going to tear all of that down for you, though, into easily digestible pieces that anyone can process, and hopefully if you're watching this video, with the hope of making this your first MMO experience, you'll get a good foothold and really get to focus on the aspects of the game that you like the most. Believe me when I say there is an insane amount to love about Lost Ark. So first things first, there are a couple really important things to know about this game before you even go searching through Steam. Probably the most important thing and what might hold some people back is the price tag. The very expensive $0 price tag. Lost Ark is a free-to-play MMO action RPG. In fact, the only thing this game is really going to cost you is disk space. This game knocked my XCOM 2 down to the silver medalist position for disk space on my PC, so with that in mind, you really don't need to come into Lost Ark worried too much about the PC performance, as long as you've got the space. The other thing to mention, though, is that the game is actually incredibly well optimized for a multiplayer experience. So, the game actually comes with DirectX 11, and that is going to further increase the performance, but I'm not going to go into a whole lot of PC details. The real point I'm trying to make here is that even if you're a down-on-your-luck potato farmer in the computer department, you don't have to worry about Lost Ark running poorly. This game is built so that you can enjoy it on almost any specs. But enough about the pre-game mindset. Hopefully those couple points have put some fears to rest and we can start talking about the game itself. Now, if you've never played an MMO before, you're going to need to choose a server because the game is a persistent world and tied to events that carry on even after you've logged out. Your server is where all that information is stored and processed for you and everyone else on the same server. Server choice is important for a number of reasons, but the most important one I would say for newcomers is going to be latency and availability with your friends. After all, the second M in MMO is multiplayer, and I would also highly recommend playing with friends if you have the opportunity, because there is a lot of content in the game that is party friendly, so do yourself a favor and send some messages to your Discord buds to get a feeler out for everybody's preferred server. If you're not worried about playing with pals, then do a quick Google search to figure out which server has the best ping for you. And then once you become a professional Lost Ark player, you can look for things like server populations or other reasons to change a server or make a character in some place or the other. But really, since all of the big endgame content is cross-server anyway, you don't have a whole lot to worry about just yet. We have arrived for the, we have arrived to the most important stuff, finally, though. When I say that, I mean character creation. So Lost Ark has one of the most robust character creators I've seen in a hot minute. So forgive me when I say I may have spent about 30 minutes just working on the facial details of my character that no one will ever get close enough to see. You know what? That's not true. There are a couple things I've seen where it does plaster the character nice and big on the front of the screen. So, hey, maybe it is worth putting the extra time into it. The creator is actually the second part of making your character, though. Before you can start working on all those face tattoos and eyeliner, you need to choose a base class to get into the game with. These base classes then break down into advanced classes, or basically subclasses, as the third phase of character creation, but we'll get into that in a second. So there are a total of 5 base classes to choose from, and these break down into a different number of subclasses depending on which you choose. The 5 base classes are your warrior, mage, gunner, martial artist, and assassin. The gunner and martial artist both have male and female options, but these will actually force you into specific subclasses in the game. Currently, the male martial artist is the striker, and the female gunner is the gunslinger. Now, typically speaking, your warriors are going to be very heavy frontline melee aggressors with big weapons and a lot of beef. Mage classes are very spell-focused, ranged backline characters that literally barf the rainbow. Martial artists are pretty mobile melee damage dealers with less health, but much cooler skills in my opinion. Gunners are your typically squishy ranged DPS class that focus on their shooty pew-pews and nuking bad guys from orbit. And then lastly, assassins are your ungodly high DPS melee characters with lower health and complete edgelord aesthetic. Remember also that you won't be picking up visually different types of weapons in the game either. Your sharpshooters will always have bows, your paladins will always have swords, and your scrappers will always have those fuck-off huge gauntlets. The weapons themselves will change aesthetic when you pick them up, but you'll never be using a greatsword on a mage or a bow on an artillerist. If you're worried about filling in a specific role, though, with your subclass, keep in mind that currently there are only 2 support subclasses in the game and 1 quote-unquote tank class, or maybe 1.5 if you're including the artillerist. Each of these classes are either in the warrior or mage base classes, so with all of that being said, don't sweat too much about which class you think is going to perform the best. Of everything that I've seen and all that I've played so far, the general opinion is that you should play what you like, because each subclass will be able to hold its own at any point in the game. All of these classes also have what's known as an awakening ability, or basically an alt, but these aren't unlocked until after level 50, so I wouldn't let this sway your decision too much. Now let's talk about some subclasses in this video. In fact, let's talk about all of them to cap off the inaugural episode of this guide. If you're still undecided after this, I'd highly recommend checking out some other YouTube videos for in-depth breakdowns, or even better than that, take each of these classes into the game's test area, and you can get a really good idea of how the character plays, what their abilities do, and what's known as their identity. So let's start off with the too big to carry with 2 hands sword-wielding maniac, the Berserker. The Berserker is a high-health, face-rushing barbarian-type character, and with their signature greatsword, you'll see a lot of spins, leaps, and charge abilities. The Berserker's identity is accessed by pressing the Z button when your meter is full and entering an enraged state. In this state, you'll get move speed, attack speed, and crit rate increases for going absolutely insane into those big bad guys and hordes of enemies. Next up is the Gunlancer. This class is the only real tank class in the game at the moment, but will definitely not be lacking in the damage department either. Gunlancers take inspiration from Monster Hunter with a huge shield and a lance that is also a gigantic cannon. Gunlancers, being warriors, mean that they'll be shouting and charging a lot, but with the Gunlance they also have some cool hooking and projectile cannon abilities. And then the Gunlancer identity is a meter that you will fill to unlock one of 2 options. The first is a defensive shield raised stance in which you gain complete CC immunity and a shield by pressing Z. This option makes you move a lot slower in exchange for being mega tanky. You can also press X, and instead you'll leap to a target location, creating a big AoE, which gives you and your allies damage reduction. But not only that, you as the Gunlancer will still be completely CC immune when landing and channeling that leap. Next up is the Paladin, our knight in shining armor and one of the 2 healer classes in the game. Paladins have a lot of holy skills and slashes while swinging their swords with some manner of classy sophistication. The Paladin identity is built and spent in two options similar to the Gunlancer. The first option you have is to spend the meter on an offensive stance, increasing your range and damage, but the second option is a defensive damage reduction buff that can be provided to any allies in your aura. Paladin is also really cool in that it will be a very proactive healer class, meaning that unlike other healers who may sit back and use abilities from a distance, the Paladin will need to be up front dealing damage and continuously gaining meter to help allies. There are also damage builds for this class too, so don't be afraid of trying it solo. Striker is the next, and as previously mentioned, is the only martial artist that is a dude at the moment. Striker may be a little bit more difficult as the game progresses because a lot of his abilities are very short range, with a few dashes to help compensate thrown in there. The Striker's identity ties back directly to his abilities, unlike the warrior classes, so Strikers still gain meter in a way, but they gain it in the form of 3 orbs instead. These orbs feed back into abilities called esoteric skills, of which there are 5. So like other martial artist classes, the Striker will be using a solid number of abilities to build orbs, and then unleashing them in the form of heavy burst damage via esoteric skills. The next class on the list is the Soulfist, and is the first female martial artist, and the Soulfist is your first true-to-form DBZ character. This class shoots fireballs, power-ups, and uses energy instead of mana. The identity of the Soulfist is focused on a power-up stance that can be used 3 times. You're essentially going Super Saiyan with this identity, which will increase your attack speed, your move speed, and reduce your cooldowns. The Scrapper is going to be the next martial artist class. Well, and this class is the one that you're going to see in the beginning parts of this video. This is my personal favorite so far, and is also very beginner friendly. The Scrapper identity ties back into their abilities as well in the form of 2 resource gauges. The first is the Stamina gauge, which charges your yellow abilities and will recover over time. And the second is the Shock gauge, which is going to use green meter, which is generated from using your yellow abilities and does not regenerate over time. Typically speaking, you will build up your green bar with your yellow skills on shorter cooldowns, and then do the big damage with your green skills, which usually have much longer cooldown. Pretty simple, but really fun, just the way I like it. Next up is our War Dancer. It shares a lot of similarities to Striker, actually a lot of identical skills to Striker, if we're being honest. Both classes use esoteric skills and use the orb generation for their identity. The differences aren't really huge until we get later on in the progression, but for now we can consider the War Dancer and Striker simply the male and female versions of the other, at least until we progress way later into the game. But our first Gunner class up is called the Deadeye. Deadeyes and Gunslingers are actually in the same boat as the War Dancer and the Striker. Both classes behave in similar ways until much later in your progression. So for now, we'll talk about the identity of both, which is swapping between their 3 weapons. Deadeyes have access to a pistol, a shotgun, and a rifle, and this, however, gets a bit complex because the identity for your class is the ability to change between the weapons. So, your main weapons, your pistols, have 8 abilities, while your rifle and your shotgun both have 4 of their own. So at any given time, you're effectively managing your gun swaps for 16 different abilities at any given fight, which is just nutty. So that being said, that is both the Deadeye and the Gunslinger. They have the same identity, but they will operate much differently as the game goes on. The next Gunner class is the Sharpshooter, which at the moment is my second favorite, and this guy is here to join your Hulks, your Thors, your Black Widows, and saving the world from certain tomb. Sharpshooters use a bow and knives in combat and have a literal hawk as their identity. Your hawk buddy is generated via meter, and once summoned will intermittently attack your foes, and then you'll also gain 2 other abilities while the meter is active. So, pressing the Z button is going to cause your hawk to create a huge vortex, dealing damage in a big circle, and the second one will consume all of what is left of your hawk meter to deal a huge amount of damage in one blow. Artillerist is the last gunner class and is the healthiest of the group, also being considered almost a tank in some circles. The Artillerist has the biggest gun and uses huge explosives while being able to stand on the front line like a melee class while being a range class. The identity for this class is a meter that you generate, which also buffs your damage depending on how full the meter is. This can build up to 30%, at which point the 30% damage boost will last for 20 seconds. And you also have the ability to press the Z button at full meter and become a turret. Now, I know that doesn't sound super cool to begin with, but once you're in turret form, you'll gain complete CC immunity, you'll get shields, and you'll get access to 4 new skills that deal insane AoE damage. I'm sure if you are seeing anything on this class right now, you know that the turret isn't wimpy. Moving on, our first assassin subclass is called the Deathblade. Deathblade has 2 short swords and a long sword on her back, and her abilities are very slashy, and I'd even go so far as to say a bit dancey. The Deathblade identity is a meter that builds into 3 orbs, and these will fill up when activated to give you mana recovery, attack speed, damage, and cooldown reduction on your abilities. While in this state, you will be dealing more damage, but you will also have the ability to end the state early with a large AoE that will explode in a line, doing pretty considerable damage. The second path for the the assassin class is the Shadowhunter. Shadowhunters use really big arm blades to deal big melee damage, but also have a couple ranged abilities that they help keep the distance from time to time. So remember how I said the Soulfist has a Super Saiyan identity? Well, the Shadowhunter has a Super Satan identity. The Shadowhunter can use a portion of their meter to buff certain skills that they have, or they can wait until their meter is completely full, at which point they unleash their demonic rage and gain a whole new set of abilities. These abilities do good damage and also have a very high stagger rate, which might not make a whole lot of sense right now, but for the time being, just remember stagger is really important for knocking down bosses. Now, our last 2 classes are mage specific, the first being our second healer in the game. The Bard is a ranged healing class that plays songs and literally covers the field in colors. Identity-wise, for the Bard, we generate meter and can spend the meter in one of 2 ways. Because the meter for the Bard has 3 tiers, the amount of meter generated will dictate the effectiveness of the ability that we use. Bards can use one song to buff the damage of allies, or the other song to generate a healing field. And then lastly, there is the Sorceress class. I don't think there's much I really need to describe here. We get a staff, there's some magic, take a rabbit out of a hat maybe? The Sorceress identity can be used in one of 2 ways as well. Once the meter is generated up to at least 30%, we can use it to activate a buffed state, and this buff will give us casting speed, cooldown reduction, and damage while active, but will deplete gradually while we are using it. The other thing that you can do with your meter is on the X key. So Z is to enter your buffed state, X is to use a very long-range blink ability. Obviously, the blink doesn't continuously deplete your meter and is really effective for incoming or avoiding incoming damage, but any movement skill is really, really special for any of the DPS classes, because dodging damage in this game is very, very important. But that is it for the very first episode of the Newcomer's Guide to Lost Ark, everyone. I've been waiting on this game for quite a while now, and I'm happy to say that I was not disappointed with what the team at Smilegate have produced. So stick around for more, and I will see you all next time.